Hollywood is full of glitter, fame, and unforgettable stars. But sometimes, behind the smiles and applause, tension simmers. Few knew that Carol Burnett, the queen of comedy, had someone in her life she absolutely despised more than anyone. What happened to make her feel that way? And how did it affect her career and personal life? Join us as we uncover the shocking stories, behind-the-scenes clashes, and Hollywood drama that you've never heard before about Carol Burnett. The fracture behind the laughter. For years, Carol Burnett and Harvey Korman were the heart of the Carol Burnett Show. Their timing, trust, and chemistry made every sketch feel natural. Viewers saw them as a team that could never be shaken. Carol brought warmth and quick wit, while Harvey delivered sharp, steady humor that balanced her playful style. Together, they created some of the most memorable comedy moments on television. Audiences at home believed they were as close off-screen as they were in front of the cameras. But behind this picture-perfect partnership, small cracks had already started to form. Crew members later said these cracks became noticeable around season 6 and 7, right when the show was at its peak. Harvey began showing signs of irritability that were out of character for him. Instead of joking around backstage the way he once did, he became quieter and often kept to himself. Costume designer Bob Mackie recalled moments when Harvey snapped at small mistakes or avoided Carol before rehearsals. These were small behaviors on their own, but together they pointed to a growing tension many didn't yet understand. While the public adored the show, the atmosphere at CBS was becoming heavier each year. Ratings were higher than ever. The network had extended the show for 3 more seasons, and the team had just collected their 4th Emmy. With all this success came enormous pressure. Every episode had to be better than the last. Every joke had to land. Every performance had to stay sharp. For the cast and crew, there was little room for error. This pressure affected everyone differently, but Harvey seemed to struggle the most. People close to the production believed he felt overshadowed by Carol's rising fame. She was clearly the face of the show, the one audiences remembered first, and some said Harvey feared that his own success was being swallowed by hers. Quiet conversations around the studio hinted at ego clashes, fatigue, and creative frustration. It wasn't open conflict yet, but it was a buildup that was getting harder to ignore. That buildup finally exploded one afternoon during a rehearsal with guest singer Petula Clark. A simple lighting mistake left Harvey's face in shadow during a key scene. To most performers, this would have been an easy fix, but Harvey snapped. He threw his script to the floor and shouted across the stage, demanding to know why no one could get it right. People froze. Director Dave Powers tried to calm him, but Harvey continued, complaining loudly that even Carol hadn't noticed the mistake. His comment cut deeper than anything he had said before. Carol, known for her calmness and kindness, walked from her seat to the stage. She didn't yell. She didn't argue. She simply said, in a clear and steady voice, "Harvey, I've had enough. If you can't respect everyone here, you don't need to be here." The entire studio went silent. Harvey stared at her, turned around, and walked off set. No one followed him. Afterward, a cameraman said he saw Carol sitting alone, looking at Harvey's empty chair and whispering that she never wanted things to reach this point. The story spread fast. Newspapers reported that Harvey had left the show. Rumors filled the gap where CBS refused to comment. Vicki Lawrence and other cast members tried to reach Harvey, but he stayed quiet. Meanwhile, Carol continued filming as if nothing had happened, refusing to talk about the meltdown. Crew members said she seemed steady, but clearly tired. A few days later, CBS received a phone call from Harvey. He asked to speak to Carol. When she picked up, he apologized. His voice shook. He admitted he was wrong and asked to return. The next day, he walked into the morning meeting and apologized to the entire team. Carol stepped forward and hugged him. The room erupted in relieved applause, but many felt something between them had changed forever. Harvey stayed on the show for several more years. but the easy warmth he and Carol once shared never fully returned. Their relationship became more professional and careful. After he eventually left the show, Carol remained supportive of his work, but she later admitted the meltdown marked a turning point she could never forget. The event, now known as the Studio 33 blowup, became one of the most talked about behind-the-scenes stories in CBS history. And just when Carol thought the storm had passed, a new and even more personal challenge was waiting. The marriage that couldn't survive. Carol Burnett and Joe Hamilton first met when they were both working in television. Carol was a young performer with energy and a clear talent for comedy. Joe was older, with years of experience producing shows. He had worked on programs with big names and knew how television worked behind the scenes. Their early meetings happened during studio taps and rehearsals. They talked about work, ideas, and plans. Over time, their professional respect grew into something more personal. Joe's experience gave him confidence. He knew how to shape a show and how to manage a cast and crew. For Carol, that knowledge felt like support. In the early years of their relationship, they worked well together. Carol trusted Joe's judgment. Joe trusted Carol's instincts. Together, they built a team around The Carol Burnett Show that blended heart and humor. The couple supported each other's ambitions. They shared creative energy and a common goal: to make good television that connected with viewers. As the show grew, so did their reputation and success. At that stage, their partnership looked like a natural fit of talent and skill. As the show became a hit, Joe's role inside the production changed. He moved from being a supportive partner to a more controlling figure behind the scenes. His influence grew. He took on more responsibilities. He began making final calls on scripts, guest lists, and the overall tone of the program. The show's growth required structure and decisions, and Joe stepped into that position. This shift created tension with Carol's creative vision. Carol believed the show should balance comedy with honest emotion. She wanted characters and sketches to feel real. Joe's approach focused more on structure and format. He pushed for tighter control over what went on air and who appeared on the show. Small disagreements appeared at first. Carol argued for scenes that showed heart. Joe argued for scenes that would keep the show moving and easy to sell. These differences were not dramatic early on, but they widened with time. The arguments were about more than content. They were about control, who decided the direction of the show, and how their joint work should be used. As Joe took on more control at work, his presence at home began to change. He started spending longer hours at the studio. He took on side projects that kept him away from home. At first, Carol accepted this as part of their jobs. Later, the distance felt different. People around them began to notice a shift in their relationship. In Los Angeles, whispers started. Colleagues talked quietly about a younger CBS editor who seemed close to Joe. These conversations were not public at first. Carol only heard pieces of them in private moments or through friends who were worried. She did not confront Joe right away. She wanted to be sure of the facts. She did not want to act on rumors. The idea of cheating hurt her, but she held back until she could confirm what was really happening. When Carol did learn more, the pain was deep. Hearing co-workers discuss an affair made her question both her marriage and their partnership. She felt betrayed, not just as a wife, but as a creative partner who had built a show with him. Still, she delayed a public confrontation until she had proof she could stand behind. The moment that changed everything came through legal discovery. Carol's lawyer uncovered documents showing Joe had created a company called Hamilton Productions. The records listed spin-off projects tied to The Carol Burnett Show. One of those projects was Mama's Family, which had originated from a sketch on Carol's show. The troubling detail was that these rights were registered under Joe's name and his company, not under Carol's. When Carol confronted Joe about the registrations, she asked a simple question: "Do you think it's fair to turn what we built together into something just yours?" His reply shocked her. He answered, "It's business, Carol, not emotion." That moment changed how she saw him. His words showed a separation between personal loyalty and business interests. Carol moved from hurt to resolve. She realized the fight would not be won by private pleas. It would require legal steps. Carol filed for divorce. The news spread fast. The case became a public drama that drew reporters and fans. The legal battle lasted nearly a year. The main issues were ownership of the show's name, rights to spin-offs, and division of profits. Both sides hired lawyers and presented evidence in court. Reporters from major outlets waited outside the courtroom each day. Throughout the proceedings, Carol remained composed. She answered questions with calm and dignity. Observers noted her steady presence and focus. Joe looked different in public. The strain of the trial and the collapse of their marriage affected him visibly. In the end, the court awarded Carol the rights to the show's name. Joe received a share of syndication profits. The decision was a split that reflected both parties' contributions, but it left Carol with the creative identity she had built and Joe with a financial interest. After the verdict, headlines quoted Carol's quiet words, "We were the best team until he forgot I was more than a partner." Those lines showed both the hurt and the strength she carried through the conflict. After the divorce, Carol cut ties with Joe's productions. She refused to be associated with the projects that had come from the split. Joe's career did not recover in the same way. Over the following years, he faced health problems and a decline in his public presence. When he passed away, Carol did not attend the funeral. She sent white flowers with a short note, "I wish you peace, Joe. As for me, I'll keep going." The gesture was small and private. Years later, at the Paley Center for Media, Carol reflected on what had happened. She said a simple truth: love alone is not enough. Trust and respect must be part of a partnership, or the bond will not survive the pressures of success. That lesson stayed with her as she continued her work and life. Want to see what happened next in Carol's life and career? The unforgettable midnight call. It was the kind of quiet night that makes small sounds seem loud. Carol Burnett's house in Coldwater Canyon was dark and still. Her 2 daughters were asleep. Outside, the hills were dimly lit. The housekeeper thought the ringing phone might be a studio emergency and woke Carol. At 2 in the morning, Carol answered, expecting a call about a taping or a late change. Instead, a deep, familiar voice said, "Carol, it's Marlon Brando." At first, Carol thought it might be a prank. Brando was a major movie star, and his voice was unmistakable. When he mentioned that he had watched a rerun of the Carol Burnett show, she realized the call was real. The conversation began with warmth. He talked about acting and the craft. He spoke slowly and thoughtfully. For a time, the talk felt like 2 performers sharing ideas about work and life. It was flattering and surprising at that hour, but as the minutes passed, the tone shifted. Brando's comments grew more personal. What began as praise moved toward remarks that made Carol uncomfortable. He lingered on compliments that felt too intimate for a late-night phone call. Carol tried to steer the talk back to safer topics. When the conversation continued to cross the line, she decided to end it. She told him, politely but firmly, that it was late and she had an early call the next day. She hung up the phone. Hanging up on a figure like Brando was not an easy step. He was powerful in Hollywood. He had just changed the movie world with major films. But for Carol, the boundary mattered more than his fame. She trusted her felt sense of discomfort. She chose to protect her privacy and her professional life. The call was over, but the consequences were only beginning. By morning, the story was everywhere. The Hollywood press turned a private phone call into front-page news. Gossip columnists wrote long pieces about the late-night conversation. Some reports suggested Brando had been smitten. Rumors spread quickly. Carol felt anger and embarrassment as journalists and columnists spun the story into various versions. She had not wanted attention from a private exchange. Now the exchange had become public. CBS moved to protect her image. The network issued a short statement saying the call was personal. The aim was to push back against wild speculation and to remind readers that private conversations do not always mean anything beyond the two people involved. Still, the gossip kept going. Anonymous sources and unnamed friends added detail and color, whether true or not. Carol's team worked to tamp down the rumors, but they could not control every story that appeared. The incident made Carol set clear boundaries for herself. She made a private decision that she would never again appear in the same space with Brando. This was not a public announcement. It was a rule she and her PR team followed quietly. When planning events, her public schedule included an unspoken instruction: do not attend where Brando might be present. She and her inner circle treated that instruction as routine. It was a step to keep her life and career separate from uncomfortable situations. Brando did not apologize. He later made offhand remarks that suggested he thought the incident had been blown up by the press. Those comments aggravated Carol. They made her feel dismissed and not taken seriously. Her quiet choice to avoid him became a personal line she would not cross. She saw the episode not just as a private discomfort, but as a lesson in setting limits in a career where boundaries can be tested. At the AFI Awards, when Brando appeared on the red carpet, Carol chose to look away. Cameras and guests noticed the distance, and insiders began to whisper. The press described it as a coincidence, but people who worked with both stars understood it was intentional. Over time, the episode became one of the small, strange stories people told about Hollywood. It was not a scandal in the legal sense. It was a moment that showed how a single crossing of a line can change relationships and behavior. Carol never spoke publicly about the night in detail. She did not want to feed rumors or give the story new life. Her silence was part of how she protected herself. For her, the main lesson was clear: protect your space and your dignity. That quiet rule stayed with her, shaping how she managed interactions with powerful figures in show business. Want to know about the next fallout that tested Carol's public image and private life? The Beverly Hilton incident. Hollywood was in full glamour mode the night of the Beverly Hilton Gala. The ballroom shimmered with lights and was filled with stars from the golden age of film. Carol Burnett arrived that evening dressed in a deep red gown designed by Bob Mackie, radiant and confident. The room was buzzing with energy as legends mingled, including Lucille Ball, Elizabeth Taylor, Jack Lemmon, and Gregory Peck. The event was meant to celebrate Cary Grant, who was receiving a Lifetime Achievement Award. Everyone expected warmth and mutual respect between these icons of comedy and film. Carol, as always, carried herself with grace and charm, ready to congratulate Grant personally for his recognition. Despite the anticipation of friendly exchanges, tension quietly brewed. Grant was known for his refined, sometimes aloof, demeanor. Carol's style of comedy, down to earth and full of physicality and warmth, had always been different from his. On this night, the difference would become painfully clear. After the awards were presented, Carol approached Cary Grant's table to offer congratulations. She raised her champagne glass and smiled politely, expecting a pleasant exchange. Instead, Grant made a comment that stunned everyone nearby. He mocked her style, saying that her performance on television involved waving arms, making faces, and overacting, and that he could not understand why audiences enjoyed it. The room went silent. Guests who had been chatting paused, unsure how to react. The comment was public, pointed, and unnecessary. Carol, maintaining her poise, did not raise her voice or argue. Instead, she responded calmly and clearly, saying, "Maybe people prefer laughing with real folks rather than with perfection." Her answer was quiet but sharp, cutting through the tension. Grant's smile stiffened, and he was left momentarily speechless. Carol gave a polite nod and walked away, leaving the room buzzing with quiet whispers about what had just happened. The next day, the Los Angeles Times ran a brief story about a frosty encounter between Cary Grant and Carol Burnett. The article highlighted the awkwardness of the interaction without naming it as a confrontation. Hollywood insiders began discussing the moment openly. dividing loyalties between those who admired Grant's cinematic legacy and those who defended Carol's groundbreaking work in television comedy. CBS responded unusually directly for a network statement, praising Carol's comedy as humane and noting that her humor was born from empathy, not foolishness. It was a subtle but clear defense of her work. Meanwhile, Grant continued to make subtle jabs in interviews, often comparing television comedy to a more refined European style. He never named Carol, but the context was unmistakable. His comments reinforced a growing perception among the industry that he did not fully respect the style of humor Carol embodied. While Hollywood insiders debated the incident, television audiences rallied around Carol. Viewer letters to CBS doubled, many praising her for remaining composed and dignified in the face of public criticism. Despite the media attention, Carol refused to grant interviews about the incident. She chose to focus on her work instead of feeding the controversy. Ratings for The Carol Burnett Show continued to climb, and the show reached some of its highest viewership numbers in the weeks following the gala. Later that season, Carol invited her close friend and fellow comedy legend Lucille Ball to co-star in a special episode. The episode was a public demonstration of unity, showcasing two strong women working together in comedy. It sent a message without words. Carol Burnett would continue to prioritize her craft and creative relationships over public feuds. The Beverly Hilton incident had long-term effects on Carol's career choices. Paramount Pictures later offered her a co-starring role opposite Cary Grant in a musical film. She declined, citing scheduling conflicts publicly, but privately, she told friends, "I won't work with someone who looks down on women's laughter." The decision reflected her commitment to self-respect and her own standards for collaboration. Biographers later noted that Grant's reaction may have stemmed from insecurity when faced with a woman whose comedic strength rivaled his own legacy. Rather than allowing the encounter to discourage her, Carol used it as motivation to refine her craft further. She continued portraying characters with warmth, humor, and relatability, securing her place as one of the most beloved figures in television history. Her ability to channel the experience into creative energy helped her sustain long-term success while maintaining personal dignity. The Beverly Hilton Gala became one of Hollywood's most talked-about social moments, a reminder that even celebrated icons can clash over different visions of art and comedy. Carol Burnett's calm and confident response ensured that she remained in control of both her image and her career, refusing to let criticism dictate her choices. And just when it seemed Carol had faced her biggest public challenges, a new industry feud was quietly brewing that would test her influence in television in a very different way. The Cold War with Lorne Michaels. In the 1970s, television audiences were treated to two very different kinds of comedy. On CBS, The Carol Burnett Show was a warm, character-driven program. It focused on everyday people, funny situations, and heartfelt moments. Carol Burnett's style was relatable, inclusive, and full of charm. On the other side, NBC was launching Saturday Night Live, a live, edgy, and often politically charged sketch show. SNL aimed to push boundaries, shock viewers, and give rise to new forms of satire. Critics and fans quickly imagined what might happen if these two worlds collided. Early reviews suggested that Carol's warmth could balance SNL's sharp irreverence. But as NBC moved toward a younger, more rebellious tone, seeds of tension began to form. Carol's style represented a television era that SNL was trying to move beyond, even as her talent and influence were widely recognized. By the mid-1970s, discussions allegedly took place at NBC about the possibility of Carol Burnett hosting SNL. According to reports from insiders, Lorne Michaels, the show's producer, dismissed the idea. He reportedly said, "She doesn't fit the spirit of the show." Staffers later recalled conversations in which she was described as part of old television, a phrase meant to indicate that her comedic style did not align with SNL's younger, sharper edge. These comments were never confirmed in official statements, but they created a growing perception among industry insiders and fans that Carol was deliberately excluded. Despite her status as one of the most accomplished comedians in television history, the gatekeeping at SNL suggested that fame and talent alone were not enough. The refusal to even seriously consider her as a host became a silent statement about generational and stylistic divides in comedy. The situation became more public when the Washington Post published an article suggesting that Carol had expressed interest in hosting SNL but had never received a response. Fans were outraged. Letters and calls flooded NBC offices, demanding to know why the network's most beloved female comedian had been ignored. NBC responded vaguely, issuing statements about how guest hosts were selected based on the content and tone of each season. This non-committal reply only fueled more speculation. Carol, ever graceful, addressed the situation on a late-night appearance on Larry King Live. She smiled and said, "Maybe I'm just not edgy enough for them." The remark was understated, humorous, and full of irony, reflecting her ability to comment on the situation without anger or drama. The tension persisted for years. Michaels reportedly rejected sponsor requests to include Carol in SNL anniversary specials. Former editors and staffers shared backstage anecdotes describing the cold atmosphere whenever Carol's name came up. One memorable moment occurred at a Television Academy event in Los Angeles. Carol and Lorne Michaels were both scheduled to speak. The audience erupted into a standing ovation when Carol took the stage, a recognition of her decades of contributions to television. When Michaels walked on minutes later, the cameras captured Carol's expression, a polite smile paired with a steady gaze that insiders would later call the coldest look in Hollywood. The clip circulated widely on Entertainment Tonight, reinforcing the perception of a silent standoff between two comedy worlds. Decades later, NBC produced a tribute special called Carol Burnett, Years of Laughter and Love. During an interview, a journalist asked if she regretted never hosting SNL. Carol's response was calm, serene, and firm. "They didn't need me, and I didn't need them either." Her words sparked a social media reaction that few could have predicted. Thousands of fans shared clips and posts under the hashtag #InviteCarolSNL, demanding that the network acknowledge her contributions. The discussion reignited debates about comedy gatekeeping, the treatment of women in late-night television, and the difference between talent and opportunity. It was a reminder that, even decades later, the omission of a legendary figure like Carol Burnett could stir conversation and demand attention. Despite all the attention, Carol did not seek further validation from modern television. She chose to appear less frequently on contemporary shows, protecting her legacy and her creative image. Over time, the industry gradually recognized the significance of her absence from SNL, acknowledging that her contributions were monumental even if the network had overlooked her. The rivalry between Carol Burnett and Lorne Michaels was marked not by open confrontation, but by deliberate silence. Neither side publicly surrendered, yet Carol's consistent dignity, professionalism, and selective presence on television demonstrated a quiet victory. She maintained control over her career, proving that respect and recognition can exist without needing to publicly battle every slight. Carol Burnett's story is full of laughter, talent, and moments that tested her strength both on and off the stage. From fierce creative clashes to personal betrayals and Hollywood dramas, she navigated every challenge with grace, wit, and determination. Her journey reminds us that success isn't just about fame. It's about standing firm, knowing your worth, and keeping your integrity intact. If you enjoyed this dive into Carol Burnett's behind-the-scenes stories, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next video exploring the untold stories of Hollywood legends.